At 0642, the guard stops at the breakfast service corridor. In the child's place setting beneath a folded napkin, he sees fine crushed glass mixed into porridge. It is colorless, deliberate, and out of place. He does not touch it. He scans the room, then the cameras. A routine morning tightens into silence. Protocol says report and step back. Instinct says the threat is already inside. The guard does not react outwardly when he sees it. That restraint is learned. Years of palace service have trained him to keep his face neutral, his breathing shallow, his hands still. The porridge bowl sits exactly where it should, steam thinning into the cold morning air. Light from the east windows skims the table, catching something granular beneath the surface. Not sugar. Too irregular. Too sharp. He shifts his body slightly, enough to block the view from the doorway. No sudden movements. No alarms. He reaches down and folds the napkin over the bowl with practiced ease, as if correcting a minor oversight. The room remains quiet. The hum of the ventilation system continues. Somewhere down the corridor, shoes move at an unhurried pace. Nothing signals danger yet, which is precisely what unsettles him. He checks the time on his watch. 0642. Breakfast service is scheduled for 0655. The child will be brought through this room by routine, accompanied by a junior attendant and one rotating officer. Too many variables, too many assumptions built into habit. He steps back and keys his radio once softly. "Hold service," he says, keeping his voice even. He does not give a reason. Reasons create questions. Questions create noise. The kitchen staff member nearest the service pass looks up, confused but compliant. Trays stop moving. A kettle is switched off. The soundscape of the room subtly changes. Less clatter, more waiting. The guard moves to the side table where logs are kept, bound in dark leather, entries written in consistent hands. He turns to the breakfast prep page. There is a gap. Not a tear, not a smudge. A clean absence where a name and timestamp should be. He runs a finger lightly along the line, feeling the indentation of prior entries. Someone skipped this step deliberately or was prevented from completing it. Both are problems. Neither are accidents. He closes the log and does not remove it from the room. Removal would be noticed. Instead, he positions himself between the table and the entrance, adjusting his stance to appear casual. His body blocks the child's place setting entirely now. From the corridor, it looks like nothing more than a guard waiting for clearance. Footsteps approach. He hears the cadence before he sees the person. Measured, confident, used to being obeyed. A senior household supervisor enters, tablet in hand, eyes already scanning for delays. "Why is service paused?" she asks. He meets her gaze briefly, then looks past her shoulder as if checking timing. "Minor discrepancy," he says. "We're holding." She frowns. "On whose authority?" "Mine," he replies. He does not raise his voice. He does not elaborate. A pause stretches between them. The supervisor glances at the covered bowl, then back at him. "The schedule is tight this morning." "I'm aware." She exhales through her nose, irritation contained but present. "If this causes disruption." "It won't," he says, though he cannot be sure. What he knows is simpler. If the child enters this room before he understands how the glass arrived, something irreversible could occur. The supervisor steps aside, signaling compliance without agreement. The guard notes it. Resistance doesn't always look like refusal. Sometimes it waits. He activates the nearest camera feed on his wrist display, scanning the previous 30 minutes. One angle flickers briefly, less than a second of static, barely noticeable, easily dismissed. He flags it mentally. The corridor beyond the room grows quieter. The morning routine has been interrupted, though few yet realize it. Pressure will come next. Questions, orders framed as efficiency. He remains where he is, hand resting near the radio, eyes steady on the doorway where the child will appear if someone decides the delay has gone on long enough. Something has already gone wrong. He just hasn't been told to stand down yet. The order comes quietly, which is how pressure usually arrives inside the palace. "Resume service," the voice says over the guard's earpiece. Not sharp, not raised, administrative. The kind of instruction designed to sound routine even when it is. The duty officer does not ask for explanation. He never does. His role is to maintain flow, not investigate friction. The guard does not respond immediately. He angles his wrist display again, scrubbing through the camera feed a second time. The static returns at the same timestamp, 06:28, lasting less than a blink. He slows it down frame by frame. The interruption coincides with a figure passing between two blind spots near the service corridor. No face, no uni. Form identifier, just movement where there should be continuity. "Stand by," the guard says into the radio at last. 2 words, neutral, non-compliant. There is silence on the line. He imagines the duty officer pausing, weighing whether this warrants escalation. The guard gives him nothing further. He steps toward the covered bowl, lowers himself slightly, and angles his body to examine the contents without uncovering them. The glass fragments are fine, almost powdered but not dissolved. They catch the light differently than oats. Someone knew what they were doing. Behind him, the supervisor clears her throat. "The child is already on the move," she says. "Not a threat, a fact. If there's an issue, it should go through the proper channel." He nods once, acknowledging the statement without yielding to it. "Divert them," he replies. "That's not your call." He finally turns to face her. His expression remains unchanged. "It is until I'm relieved." She studies him, recalculating. Relief would require justification. Justification would require explanation. Explanation would ripple outward. The palace dislikes ripples before breakfast. Another message comes through his earpiece, this one closer, more direct. "You're holding up a protected movement," the duty officer says. "Confirm reason." The guard exhales slowly. "Possible contamination," he says. He chooses the word carefully. Not attack, not threat, something procedural, something that triggers protocol without triggering panic. A beat passes, then another. "Confirmed?" the officer asks. "Visually," the guard replies. "Log discrepancy and camera interruption noted." The line goes quiet. Somewhere above his clearance level, decisions are being rerouted. The supervisor's jaw tightens as she receives her own update. She steps back without comment and lifts a hand toward the doorway. The corridor beyond fills with restrained motion, footsteps slow, voices lower. The child does not appear. The guard moves with intent now. He signals for the kitchen staff to remain where they are, then removes the logbook and places it inside a sealed evidence sleeve from his belt. His movements are precise, unhurried. Panic creates mistakes. He will not create one. 2 additional guards enter, drawn by the shift in tone rather than any audible alarm. He gives them brief instructions, positions, sightlines, nothing more. They comply without questions. Trust inside the unit still holds. A senior aide arrives next, eyes already scanning for disruption. "What's happening?" she asks. "Breakfast is delayed," the guard says, "for safety." "For how long?" "As long as it takes." She looks at the table, the covered bowl, the quiet room. "You understand the implications?" "Yes," he says. Another presence enters the space then, not announced but unmistakable. The atmosphere tightens, authority without insignia. The guard does not turn immediately, but he feels it. "Remove everyone except him," a voice says behind him. Controlled, compressed. Chairs shift. Shoes retreat. The room clears until only the guard remains facing the table and the man standing several steps behind him. "Show me," the voice says. The guard lifts the napkin. For a moment nothing is said. The silence stretches, dense and contained. When the response comes, it is not loud, but it carries weight, sharp, restrained, edged with anger carefully held in check. "How did this get here?" The guard lowers the napkin again. "That's what I'm determining," he says. The man exhales once hard. The sound is brief, involuntary, then control returns. "No one leaves this floor," the voice orders. "And you," a pause measured, deliberate, "you stay exactly where you are." The guard inclines his head. He had no intention of moving. Whatever line has been crossed this morning, it is no longer small. And it will not be contained quietly for much longer. The guard remains in position long after the room empties again. The bowl has been removed under sealed cover. The table is bare now, reset to neutrality as if nothing improper was ever placed there. That absence troubles him almost as much as the glass did. Evidence creates gravity. Once it is gone, authority moves more freely. He is instructed to remain on the floor, not reassigned, not dismissed, contained. The corridor outside has changed character. Movement is quieter, more deliberate. Staff walk with purpose but avoid eye contact. Radios murmur instead of crackle. The palace has entered a holding pattern, one designed to preserve routine while quietly isolating risk. The guard leans lightly against the stone wall, feeling the cold seep through the fabric of his uniform. He keeps his posture relaxed, but his attention stays narrow. Every door, every reflection in the polished floor. Pressure does not arrive all at once here. It arrives in increments. The first increment comes as procedure. A senior security administrator approaches, flanked by an aide carrying a slim folder. The administrator. Aider's expression is neutral, practiced. This is someone accustomed to smoothing disruptions, not confronting them. "You halted service without prior authorization," the administrator says, stopping a careful distance away. "Yes," the guard replies. "You understand that's a deviation." "I do." The administrator nods, as if confirming a checklist item. "In future, visual irregularities should be reported up-chain immediately." "They were," the guard says. "I was the chain until relief arrived." A pause. The administrator glances at the aide, then back. "That's not how the structure is designed." "It's how protection works," the guard answers, not defensively, simply stated. The administrator does not challenge him directly. Instead, he shifts ground. "You're aware the household supervisor disputed your call." "I am." "And that the delay caused schedule compression." "Yes." Another pause. The administrator closes the folder without opening it. "The situation has escalated beyond your remit." The guard inclines his head. It usually does. That draws a brief tightening at the corner of the administrator's mouth. Not anger, calculation. "You'll submit a full written account." "I will." "Until then, you are to refrain from independent action." The words are measured, reasonable on the surface. The guard hears what sits beneath them. "Stay in your lane." He considers responding, then chooses restraint. "Understood," he says. The administrator turns away, satisfied enough for now. Authority, when uncertain, prefers compliance language even if compliance is incomplete. Moments later, the guard's earpiece activates again. This time the voice is lower, closer. Operational command. "You're being reviewed," the duty officer says. "Not suspended, observed." "Copy." "Do not initiate further holds." The guard looks down the corridor toward the private passage where the child was diverted earlier. He cannot see beyond the bend, but he knows the route. Knows the rhythm of steps when small feet are nervous. Knows how easily routine can be restored prematurely. "Understood," he repeats, though the word feels thinner now. A service door opens briefly farther down the hall. A staff member exits, eyes lowered, hands empty. No tray, no explanation. The guard watches until the door closes again. He checks his watch. Time has moved on, but resolution has not. The absence in the log still matters. The camera interruption still matters. Yet already the language around the incident is shifting, from contamination to delay, from threat to deviation. That is how lines of authority reassert themselves, not by denying risk, but by reframing it. The guard adjusts his stance, grounding himself. He knows what comes next: questions framed as concern, instructions framed as efficiency, and somewhere in that process, a decision will be made about whether his judgment was necessary or inconvenient. He keeps his attention forward, because if authority decides this was nothing, instinct may be the only thing left standing between order and harm. The review begins without ceremony. A conference room is prepared on the same floor, chosen for proximity rather than comfort. Frosted glass, muted lighting, a table polished to remove distraction. The guard is instructed to stand at the far end, not seated, not formally at attention, a position that suggests cooperation without granting footing. 3 people enter separately minutes apart. None introduce themselves. They do not need to. Their authority is embedded in how the room adjusts around them, doors closing softly, aides remaining outside, phones silenced without comment. The first question is procedural. Why did you delay service instead of escalating immediately? The guard answers evenly. Because escalation would have brought the child into the room before containment was established. A pen moves across paper, not recording, he notes, interpreting. The second question reframes the first. You had no confirmation of harm. No, the guard agrees. I had confirmation of risk. A pause follows, the kind that invites elaboration. He does not offer any. The third voice enters, sharper, less patient. Are you aware of the consequences of halting a protected principal's routine without clearance? Yes. And you did it anyway? Yes. Silence settles again. The room is quiet enough that the guard hears the building breathe, air cycling through vents, the distant closing of a door somewhere far beyond the corridor. He focuses on that steadiness. This is not interrogation. It is alignment. They are deciding whether his judgment fits inside their version of order. One of them opens a folder at last. The camera interruption you flagged lasted 0.7 seconds. That's correct. Within acceptable technical variance. Not at that location, the guard replies. Not at that time. A look is exchanged across the table. Subtle, almost imperceptible. The kind of glance that acknowledges a complication without conceding ground. The log omission, another says, could be clerical. It could, the guard agrees, or it could be intentional. You're speculating. I'm accounting for possibility. That earns him a longer look. Authority does not like possibility. It prefers probability, preferably low. The pressure shifts again, less about facts now, more about hierarchy. You understand, the sharper voice says, that by acting independently, you implied a failure elsewhere. The guard considers the statement, then nods, yes. And you're comfortable with that implication. Comfort is the wrong word. He chooses accuracy. I'm responsible for outcomes, not optics. No one interrupts him, but the temperature in the room drops a degree. Not literal, behavioral. This is the point where careers narrow. Another file slides forward. The child was never in danger, someone says. Because she was diverted, the guard answers, before exposure. Silence again, thicker this time. He senses it now, the quiet recalibration. They are not deciding whether he was right. They are deciding whether acknowledging that matters. Finally, the first voice speaks. You will be formally noted for deviation. The guard inclines his head, expected. But the voice continues. You will remain assigned. That is not expected. Your access will be limited pending internal review, another adds. And you will not initiate protective overrides without direct authorization. The guard absorbs this. Reduced authority, reduced sightlines. Risk redistributed upward. Understood, he says. The meeting ends as it began. No dismissal, Just departure. The room empties around him, authority flowing back into corridors and offices, leaving behind polished silence. When he steps out, the palace feels unchanged. Routine has resumed. Somewhere above, breakfast has been replaced with something safe, something approved. But as he walks the corridor back toward his post, he notices a small thing he had not before. A service camera, newly adjusted. Its angle now avoids the blind spot entirely. Someone else saw the gap. Someone else acted. And that means this is no longer only about discipline. It is about control. The schedule is never just a list of times. The guard knows this better than most. It is a living structure, adjusted constantly by proximity, mood, weather, and unseen negotiations between security, household staff, and authority above both. On paper, the child's morning appears simple. Breakfast, brief instruction, outdoor time if conditions allow. In practice, it is a narrow corridor where timing protects as much as walls do. He is granted temporary access to the schedule under supervision. Not full control, observation only. A senior aide stands nearby, close enough to see his hands, far enough to pretend trust. The screen glows softly, its brightness lowered for discretion. He scrolls slowly, not searching for drama, just continuity. There it is, a 7-minute gap. Not marked as free time, not labeled transition, just an absence between breakfast service and escort arrival. It should not exist. The child is never unaccounted for, even briefly, not officially. He notes the gap without comment and continues scrolling. The aide shifts her weight. He can feel the impatience behind her stillness. To her, this is already resolved. A contamination prevented, a disruption managed. The system worked. Looking closer feels unnecessary. But the guard has learned that harm enters through what is considered unnecessary. He taps into the movement logs, escorts assigned, routes planned. The diversion earlier created a secondary path approved verbally and logged after the fact. That matters. Retroactive logging always does. It smooths history, makes events look intentional instead of reactive. Who approved the gap? He asks quietly. The aide hesitates just long enough. It's an artifact, she says. A scheduling compression. Breakfast was delayed. No, he replies. This precedes the delay. She looks at the screen now, really looks. The gap remains, silent, unapologetic. I'll have it corrected, she says. Before or after we understand it, he asks. She does not answer immediately. Instead, she steps back and speaks into her earpiece, voice low, controlled. He waits. The palace teaches patience by necessity. When she returns, her tone has shifted. The child was briefly with a familiar staff member, unscheduled but supervised. Who? A junior attendant. Name? Another pause, smaller this time. I'll need clearance. The guard nods. He expected that. Names are currency here. They are not spent lightly. He exits the office and walks the route the child would have taken if breakfast had proceeded normally. The corridor lighting is softer here, designed to be calming. The floor is warmer underfoot. Sound carries differently. He stops at a side alcove, just wide enough for two people to stand without blocking passage. A toy rests on the ledge. Small plastic. See bright against the stone, out of place. He does not touch it. He photographs it, notes the time, the angle of the nearby camera. This camera has coverage, full, clean coverage, no flicker, no blind spot. Whoever placed the toy knew this corridor was low risk, not unseen. That matters. A voice reaches him from behind. You're not assigned here. The guard turns. Another officer, younger, correct posture, uncertain eyes. I'm tracing movement, the guard says. The schedule's been adjusted. Yes, he replies, after the fact. The younger officer hesitates, then steps aside. Deference, earned or instructed, the guard cannot tell. Either way, the corridor remains open to him. He looks once more at the toy, then back down the hall toward the private rooms. The child is elsewhere now, safe for the moment. But safety has layers, and one of them has already been breached, not by force but by access. Someone knew the schedule well enough to work inside it. And someone else assumed no one would look closely enough to notice. The toy is collected by a forensic aide within minutes. Gloves, bag, no commentary. The guard watches the process from a measured distance, noting how quickly efficiency returns once an object is labeled evidence. Before that, it was just clutter. After, it becomes weight. He requests the junior attendant's identity again, this time through formal channels. The request moves upward, slowed by politeness and phrasing. By the time the response returns, the morning has shifted fully into routine. The child is engaged elsewhere, surrounded by familiar faces, laughter kept low and controlled. The palace prefers happiness that does not carry. The name arrives on his wrist display. He recognizes it, not personally but structurally. Short tenure, clean file, assigned often to transitional moments, doorways, handovers, brief supervision between higher clearance staff, trusted enough to be present, invisible enough not to be questioned. He pulls the attendant's access record, nothing anomalous at first glance. Doors opened when scheduled, routes followed. But when he overlays the schedule gap with access timestamps, a pattern emerges. The attendant's clearance was used twice within that 7-minute window. 2 doors, 1 entrance, 1 exit, both logged as routine. Routine is the most effective disguise. He brings the data to his immediate superior, not as accusation but as alignment. The superior listens, expression unreadable, fingers steepled on the desk. "You're suggesting intent," the superior says. "I'm suggesting opportunity," the guard replies. The superior nods slowly. "Opportunity exists everywhere here." "Yes," the guard agrees, "but timing does not." The room remains quiet. Outside, the palace continues its day. Orders are given, meals served. Security maintains posture. The guard feels the familiar friction between movement and stillness, the sense that something is being held in place, not resolved. He is instructed to observe only. No interviews, no direct contact. Authority will handle that. He accepts the instruction outwardly, but his focus narrows inward. Observation is not passive if done correctly. He returns to the service corridor and reviews camera feeds again, this time expanding the window. Faces pass, trays move. Staff exchange brief words. At 06:27, the junior attendant enters frame carrying nothing. At 06:28, the static interrupts. At 06:29, the attendant exits, hands still empty. Empty hands mean nothing, or they mean everything, depending on what is small enough not to register. He slows the feed further, enhances contrast. The interruption masks more than movement, it masks sound. A single second of silence where there should be ambient noise, a footstep, fabric brushing stone, something is missing. The guard logs this observation and forwards it without commentary. Let others decide what to call it. By mid-morning, the atmosphere tightens again. Doors close more often, conversations shorten. He hears raised voices once quickly suppressed. Authority is no longer smoothing, it is containing. He is summoned briefly to confirm the toy's origin. The junior attendant denies knowledge. Calm, cooperative, no visible strain. The guard watches the denial from a distance, noting posture, cadence, breathing. Nothing definitive, nothing reassuring. Afterward, he stands alone near the private passage again. The corridor is empty now, the ledge bare where the toy once sat. The absence feels deliberate, curated. The child passes nearby moments later, guided by another attendant, unaware of the scrutiny that now follows her movements. The guard does not look directly at her. Protection here is quiet, almost invisible. He checks the schedule one final time. The gap has been filled retroactively, labeled transition supervision. Clean, official, closed. But he knows better. The schedule was not the vulnerability. It was the confidence that no one would challenge it. And that confidence, once cracked, has a way of drawing attention, both welcome and dangerous. Whatever comes next will not arrive through routine. It will arrive through response. Containment begins quietly, the way all effective measures do inside the palace. No alarms are triggered, no corridors sealed. Instead, routes are softened, schedules gently bent. The guard watches it happen from the edge of the system, close enough to see the adjustments, far enough not to be credited for them. The child's movements are reduced without explanation. Outdoor time becomes an indoor alternative. Instruction is relocated to a smaller room with fewer access points. Escorts increase by one, then another, each addition framed as routine rotation. No one uses the word threat. They use weather, timing, efficiency. The guard is reassigned to perimeter-adjacent duty on the same floor. A lateral move. Visibility without proximity. He understands the logic. Keep him useful, keep him distant. He complies outwardly, but his attention remains fixed on the interior pattern. Containment, he knows, is not about walls. It is about predictability. He notes how predictability is being rebuilt too quickly. Staff are reassured. Schedules are smoothed. The junior attendant remains on duty, though no longer assigned to the child directly. A quiet compromise, enough to suggest caution, not enough to admit concern. Authority prefers adjustments that look like coincidence. The guard requests confirmation of escort pairings for the next movement window. The response is delayed, then partial. Names without roots, roots without timing. Fragmentation disguised as coordination. He walks the revised path during a lull, measuring distances with his steps, counting doors, noting where sound drops away. One section near a service junction feels wrong, not dangerous, just neglected. A camera here has been repositioned recently, its field widened but its depth reduced, coverage without clarity. A senior aide intercepts him before he can linger. "You're not cleared to audit routes," she says. "I'm not auditing," he replies. "I'm familiarizing." "With what authority?" He considers the question, then answers honestly, "Residual." She studies him, weighing whether to press further. She does not. Pressure applied too openly creates resistance, and resistance is visible. She gestures him away instead, toward a windowed alcove where he can stand without interfering. From there, he observes the next transition. The child is escorted through the altered route, steps small, posture calm. She is talking to the attendant beside her, unaware of the additional guard trailing at a distance. The scene looks ordinary. That is the point. The guard watches hands more than faces, watches doors rather than people. Everything opens when it should. Everything closes behind them. Too smooth. As the group disappears around the bend, his radio activates. "Maintain position," the duty officer says. "No deviations." "Understood." A moment later, a different voice cuts in, lower, less formal. "They're moving faster than planned." The guard does not ask who they are. He already knows. Authority is accelerating containment, compressing timelines to restore confidence. Speed is being mistaken for control. He shifts his stance, adjusting for sightline rather than instruction. From here, he can see both the service junction and the private passage entrance. Not ideal, but workable. A cart rolls through the junction unattended, pushed by momentum rather than hands. It stops short of the wall, nudged by uneven flooring. The guard watches it until a staff member retrieves it, apologetic, flustered. Small things still slipping through. Containment is holding, but barely. He keys his radio once, then releases without speaking. A habit from earlier days when silence itself was a signal. No one responds. Either no one noticed or no one wanted to. He looks down the corridor where the child vanished, then back toward the service junction. The palace is quieter now, not because danger has passed, but because everyone is listening. Containment without panic only works if nothing tests it. And something he is certain will. The test comes subtly, almost politely. A routine request appears on the internal channel, maintenance access to the service junction for floor repair. Approved. Logged. Time to coincide with a low-traffic window. Nothing remarkable. The guard notices it only because the junction has already been adjusted twice that morning. Too much attention invites its own questions. He forwards the notice to the duty officer with a single annotation. Confirm necessity. The response is slow. When it arrives, it is non-committal. Approved earlier, the officer says. Proceed as scheduled. The guard remains where he is. He does not interfere. He watches. Two maintenance workers arrive, tools neatly arranged, uniforms clean. Their clearance badges scan without issue. They move with professional ease, but the timing is off, entering the junction a minute earlier than scheduled, exiting a minute later. Minor deviations, individually meaningless, together a pattern. As they work, the guard notes how the widened camera field obscures fine detail. Hands pass below the frame. Tools clink softly. One worker pauses near the base of the wall, back turned, body angled to block view. Nothing overt, nothing actionable. The child does not pass through during the maintenance window. Containment holds, but the guard feels the pressure shift again, not relief, but frustration. Someone expected an opportunity that did not arrive. He logs the timing discrepancies and forwards them upward. This time, the acknowledgement is immediate. No words, just a confirmation receipt. Someone is listening now. An hour later, the junior attendant is quietly reassigned off-site for well-being review. The language is careful, supportive, non-accusatory. The guard reads the notice twice. Reassignment is containment of a different kind, removal without confrontation. He watches the attendant leave through a side exit, posture unchanged, expression neutral. No struggle, no urgency. That too matters. The guard is summoned once more, this time not to a conference room, but to a narrow office overlooking the inner court. The man from earlier stands by the window, hands clasped behind his back. "We're adjusting scope," the man says without turning. "Your observations have been noted." The guard waits. "There will be no formal inquiry," the man continues. "Not unless something else surfaces." "And if it does?" the guard asks. The man turns then, face composed, eyes tired. "Then we'll already be behind." The guard absorbs this. Authority choosing containment over exposure, stability over certainty. He understands the calculus. He does not agree with it. "You'll remain assigned," the man adds, "but you will not pursue this independently." The guard nods. He has heard this before. As he leaves the office, the palace feels marginally lighter, as if tension has been redistributed rather than resolved. Staff move more freely. Voices lift slightly. Confidence returns in small increments. The child's laughter carries briefly from a distant room. It stops just as quickly. The guard does not turn toward the sound. He does not need to. He knows where she is, knows who is with her, for now. Containment has worked in the narrowest sense. No harm, no incident, no disruption that cannot be explained away. But containment has also created a boundary. Beyond it, questions remain unanswered. Patterns remain incomplete. And someone, somewhere inside the system, has learned exactly how close they came and how the palace chose to respond. The guard returns to his post, posture steady, attention narrowed once more. Containment without panic preserves calm. It does not erase intent. The confrontation does not announce itself. It begins as a summons, delivered without urgency, without explanation. The guard is told to report to a private sitting room off the main corridor, one not used for briefings, not used for staff, but not fully informal either. A space reserved for moments that must be contained but cannot be ignored. He arrives early. The room is cool, the air still. Heavy curtains mute the daylight, leaving the space evenly lit but detached from time. Two chairs face each other across a low table. No documents are laid out. No screens active. This is not a review. It is personal. He stands rather than sits. When the door opens, the shift in pressure is immediate. The man enters without escort, without aides. His movements are controlled, but the restraint is active, not natural. Anger is present, not loud, not unfocused, but compressed, held just beneath the surface. The guard does not salute. This is not that kind of meeting. "You delayed my daughter's mourning," the man says. His voice is level. That is what makes it dangerous. "Yes," the guard replies. "You interfered with household schedule, security hierarchy, and staff authority." "Yes." The man steps closer, stopping just short of the table. His hands rest on its edge, fingers spread, grounding himself. "And you did it without bringing it to me." "Yes." Silence stretches. The guard keeps his gaze steady, not challenging, not deferential. He knows this moment is not about protocol. It is about control and about fear that has not yet found a place to go. "Do you understand," the man says slowly, "what it looks like when my child is diverted without explanation?" "I do." "And you chose that anyway." "Yes." The man straightens abruptly, turning away toward the curtained window. The movement is sharp, restrained too late. He exhales once, hard, then again more slowly. When he speaks next, the anger is closer to the surface. "You are not here to make unilateral decisions." "No," the guard agrees. "I'm here to prevent outcomes." That earns a sharp glance. "Outcomes you imagined." "Outcomes I recognized as possible." The man turns fully now. His eyes are fixed, searching the guard's face for hesitation, for doubt. There is none, not because the guard is certain, but because certainty is not required for restraint. "You found glass," the man says, not a question. "Yes." "In her food?" "Yes." Another silence, this one heavier. The man's jaw tightens. His voice, when it returns, is lower. "Then why am I hearing about schedule compression and clerical gaps?" The guard does not answer immediately. He chooses his words carefully, because those explanations reduce exposure. "To whom?" the man asks. The guard meets his gaze. "To the institution." The room feels smaller now. The man's control wavers, not into shouting, but into something more dangerous, certainty sharpened by anger. "You don't get to decide what my child is exposed to," he says. "No," the guard replies, "but I do get to decide when something feels wrong." The words land harder than intended. The man's hand strikes the table once, not violently but decisively. The sound is sharp in the quiet room. "You stepped outside your authority." "Yes." "And if you were wrong?" "Then nothing happens," the guard says. "Which is the best possible failure?" The man stares at him, breathing controlled but heavy. The guard can see it now, not rage directed outward, but fear turned inward, colliding with power that cannot undo vulnerability. For a long moment, neither speaks. Then the man says quietly, "You don't get to be wrong with my children." The guard does not respond. He does not need to, because the confrontation is not over. It has only narrowed. The silence stretches until it becomes a test of endurance rather than authority. The guard holds his position, weight evenly distributed, eyes steady. He does not justify himself further. Justification would shift the balance toward argument. This is not an argument. The man turns away again, pacing once along the length of the room. His steps are measured but tight, heels striking the floor a fraction harder than necessary. When he speaks, it is not to the guard but to the space itself. "They tell me containment worked," he says. "They tell me no harm occurred." "That's correct," the guard replies. "And they tell me it didn't need to go as far as it did." The guard says nothing. He knows better than to interrupt the moment when authority speaks to convince itself. The man stops pacing. "You understand what happens next," he says without turning. "There will be no public acknowledgement, no internal reckoning that reaches daylight." "Yes." "People will keep their posts." "Yes." "The narrative will stabilize." "Yes." The man turns back then, eyes sharp. "And you will carry the weight of that decision." The guard inclines his head slightly, not acceptance, recognition. "I need to know something," the man says. His voice is quieter now, stripped of edge. "If I hadn't intervened, if this had gone through channels instead of instinct, would she have been hurt?" The guard does not answer immediately. This is the only question that matters, and it cannot be answered safely. Certainty here would be dishonest. Uncertainty would sound like weakness. "I don't know," he says finally, "but the window existed." The man closes his eyes briefly. When he opens them again, the anger has cooled into something harder to manage. "You're staying assigned," he says, "for now." The guard nods. "But your access will remain limited," the man continues. "You won't lead, you won't direct." "Yes." "And if this happens again," he stops himself, jaw tightening, "you will bring it to me immediately." The guard considers this. Direct access is not a gift, it is a burden. It centralizes risk, but refusal would be read as defiance. "I will," he says. The man studies him for a long moment, then steps back, increasing the distance between them. The confrontation has reached its end not through resolution, but through exhaustion. "You may go," he says. The guard turns and leaves without ceremony. The door closes softly behind him, sealing the room and whatever remains unresolved inside it. Back in the corridor, the palace feels different again. Not calmer, sharper, as if lines have been redrawn quietly, invisibly. He walks his post, aware now that his presence carries a different weight, not trust, not suspicion. Expectation. He passes a reflective surface and catches his own image briefly. The uniform sits the same. The posture is unchanged, but something internal has shifted. He is no longer operating solely within protocol or instinct. He is operating under notice. As he rounds the corner near the private passage, he hears the child's voice again, soft, absorbed in conversation. The sound steadies him. He does not look toward it. He does not need to. The confrontation has not produced answers. It has produced alignment, fragile, conditional, and dependent on silence. That alignment will be tested, not by anger, but by the next decision that cannot wait for permission. Restriction becomes visible in small ways before it is spoken aloud. The guard notices it first in the delay of information. Feeds that once updated in real time now refresh a fraction slower. Access confirmations arrive with softened language, pending, under review, as discussed. Nothing overt, nothing that can be challenged without sounding paranoid. This is how authority reasserts control after conceding ground. He is still assigned to the same floor, still responsible for presence, but decision-making has been pulled upward, centralized. Protection has been separated from judgment. The distinction is subtle but dangerous. Mid-morning brings the first test. A movement change is issued for the child. Not drastic, just a relocation of afternoon instruction to a larger room, one used occasionally for visiting tutors. The rationale is practical: lighting, space, scheduling. The request is clean, properly rooted, approved at multiple levels. The guard reads it twice. The room has more access points, 3 doors instead of 1. 2 service corridors intersect nearby. Cameras cover the space, but coverage is layered, not continuous. Safe by design, but only if timing holds. He flags the change with a neutral query. Confirm escort strength and sweep timing. The response comes quickly. Standard protocol applies. Standard protocol assumes trust. He walks the route again, slower this time, letting his attention drift where it normally wouldn't. He listens for sound bleed through walls, feels temperature changes near door seams, notes how one service corridor carries footsteps farther than expected. At the room itself, a setup team is already working. Furniture moved, materials arranged, familiar staff, routine faces, nothing to object to. But one door, an auxiliary access used mostly by maintenance, is unlocked. He pauses. Unlocked does not mean open, but it means optional, and optional creates choice. He signals to the nearest supervisor. That door should be secured during occupancy. The supervisor glances at it, then back at him. It's within the controlled zone. It shouldn't be available, the guard says. The supervisor's expression tightens slightly. This configuration has been approved. By whom? By people above both of us. The guard nods once. He does not argue. Argument would trigger escalation. Escalation would draw scrutiny he no longer controls. He secures the door himself anyway smoothly without making it an issue. A small action, easily overlooked. His earpiece activates moments later. Do not alter approved configurations, the duty officer says. Calm, corrective. I secured an auxiliary access, the guard replies, temporarily. That wasn't authorized. Neither is exposure. A pause, then, you're exceeding your scope. The guard leans lightly against the wall, eyes still on the room. I'm maintaining it. Stand down, the officer says, not raised, final. The guard feels the familiar pressure settle in his chest. This is the line, not dramatic, not loud, just clear. The child will arrive here shortly. The room will fill with voices, materials, routine, and if something goes wrong, it will be small, a moment, an access point, a person where they should not be. He keys his radio but does not speak. Protocol says step back and report. Instinct says that once he does, the choice is no longer his. He watches the corridor where the child will appear. Time narrows. The child arrives on schedule. Her escort is tight, professional, unhurried. 2 guards, 1 attendant, spacing correct, pace steady. The guard watches the formation enter the larger room, notes how the additional space changes the dynamic. Distance increases. Sound disperses. Small movements become harder to track. The auxiliary door remains closed. For now, the guard positions himself just outside the primary entrance, where he has partial sightlines to all 3 access points. It is not ideal. Ideal was removed earlier. He adjusts to what remains. Inside, instruction begins. Voices are low. The cadence is calm. The child settles into her seat, attention directed forward. To an observer, the scene is stable. The guard's earpiece hums softly, then activates. Your presence is sufficient, the duty officer says. Do not interfere unless directed. The guard does not respond. Minutes pass, nothing happens. That too is dangerous. It encourages complacency. A maintenance alert appears briefly on his display, then clears. He scrolls back. The alert references the auxiliary corridor, time-stamped 30 seconds ago, approved automatically. No human confirmation. He shifts his weight. A faint sound reaches him, not loud enough to draw attention but distinct. A latch, eased rather than opened. Metal against metal, dampened by care. The auxiliary door moves. Not fully, just enough. The guard steps forward. Hold, the duty officer says immediately. You are not cleared to enter. The guard's hand is already on the door. He opens it. The core. Idor beyond is empty at first glance. Light hums overhead. The smell of cleaning solution lingers. Then he sees movement at the far end, a figure stepping back just out of full view. Not running, not startled, controlled. Stop, the guard says. The figure does not stop. The guard moves, fast but contained. He covers the distance in seconds, rounding the corner as the figure disappears through another access point. A service stairwell door swings shut. He checks the lock, engaged. He keys his radio. Unscheduled access attempt. Corridor B, secure the room. The response is immediate and sharp. Return to post. Negative, he says. Child proximity breach. Silence, then overlapping voices. Commands reframing themselves mid-sentence. Authority scrambling to catch up with action. He returns to the instruction room within moments. The child is still seated, calm, unaware. One escort has shifted position, subtly blocking her line of sight to the auxiliary door. Well trained. The guard meets the escort's eyes. A single nod passes between them. No words. Containment holds again. Moments later, senior security floods the corridor. Questions follow: why he moved, why he entered, why he exceeded instruction. The guard answers simply, because someone tried to access the room. Who? I don't know. Then you had no confirmation. I had movement. The man from earlier arrives last. He takes in the scene without speaking. The sealed auxiliary door, the tightened escort formation, the guard standing just off-center, breathing controlled. He looks at the guard. Did you stop them? No, the guard replies, but they didn't reach her. The man's jaw tightens, not anger this time, something colder. He turns to the duty officer. Why was that door unlocked? The officer opens his mouth, then closes it. There is no clean answer. The man looks back at the guard. You were told to stand down. Yes. And you didn't. No. A long pause. Remove him from the floor, the man says. Immediately. The words land without heat, without drama. The guard does not resist as he is escorted away. He does not argue. He knows what this is. A line drawn publicly, authority correcting deviation. As he is led down the corridor, he hears the child's voice again, faint but steady. Safe. That is enough. But as the doors close behind him, he understands the cost. Protection has won this moment. Protocol will respond. And it will not be gentle. Removal is handled with precision. No visible force. No raised voices. The guard is escorted through secondary corridors, away from the child's floor, away from sightlines that might invite interpretation. The palace knows how to make something decisive look routine. He is placed in a small holding office near administrative security, neutral territory. The door closes softly. A chair, a table, a camera in the corner, obvious enough to be reassuring rather than covert. He remains standing. Time stretches, not long enough to feel punitive, long enough to signal consequence. When the door opens again, it is not the man from before. It is two others. Senior, controlled, professional. One speaks while the other observes. You exceeded direct instruction, the speaker says. Again. Yes, the guard replies. You entered a restricted corridor without authorization. Yes. You failed to identify the individual involved. Yes. The observer makes a note. The pen does not pause. You understand, the speaker continues, that this creates instability. I understand it creates friction, the guard says. Instability comes from pretending the breach didn't happen. A pause, not disapproval, assessment. The corridor alert was auto-approved, the observer says, looking up for the first time. No human confirmation. That's why it mattered, the guard replies. Silence settles again. The room is quiet enough to hear the building system cycling. The guard focuses on that rhythm. He does not rehearse defenses. He does not anticipate outcome. He has already made the decision that counts. You are being temporarily removed from close protection, the speaker says. Effective immediately. The guard nods once. You will not return to the child's detail. He absorbs that without visible reaction. Distance is not the same as failure. It is, however, a loss of influence. You will be reassigned pending final review. Yes. The observer closes the folder. For the record, he says, your actions prevented escalation. The speaker turns sharply. The observer continues anyway. They also forced exposure. Both statements hang in the air, equal and incompatible. The meeting ends. No dismissal, just departure. The guard is escorted out through a different route, one that passes near an internal courtyard. He pauses briefly at the window as he walks. Outside, the day is clear. Staff cross the open space in measured lines. Routine has fully reasserted itself. By late afternoon, word circulates quietly. The auxiliary quarry. Door access was traced to a borrowed badge. The maintenance request was legitimate, but misused. The individual who stepped back into the stairwell was identified through secondary footage. Not a senior figure, not a mastermind. Someone close enough to trust systems, distant enough to believe they wouldn't be noticed. The child remains unaffected. That becomes the official outcome. By evening, the guard receives a brief update through internal channels. The individual is no longer employed. The matter is considered contained. No further action required. Contained, resolved, closed. He sits alone in the reassignment office, jacket folded on the chair beside him. The day has taken its weight. Not exhaustion, something quieter, a recalibration. He thinks of the small things that mattered. The glass that caught the light, the gap in the log, the toy on the ledge, the door that moved a fraction too easily. None of them dramatic, all of them decisive. The palace will move on. It always does. He stands as the door opens again, expecting another instruction. Instead, a single message appears on his display. No sender name, just text. You were right to act. You will be reassigned quietly. Thank you. No signature, no promise. The guard powers the display down and places it back on the table. Quiet resolution is never about recognition. It is about what does not happen afterward. And tonight nothing happens. That is the result. Reassignment arrives before dawn. It is delivered as a schedule update, not a conversation. A new post, a different wing, peripheral but not symbolic. The kind of placement given to someone who cannot be praised publicly and cannot be ignored privately. The guard reports without comment. The new position overlooks a series of internal routes, staff corridors, logistics passages, the connective tissue of the palace. No children, no principals, but access to patterns, to movement that rarely draws attention unless someone is watching for it. He begins watching again. The individual removed the previous evening is already being spoken of in the past tense. Files are sealed. Language has settled. The explanation circulating is clean. Misuse of access, isolated lapse corrected swiftly. The system congratulates itself quietly. But the guard notices small adjustments continuing. Badge protocols tightened. Auto approvals reduced. Maintenance windows now staggered instead of stacked. These changes are not announced. They are simply done. That is how lessons survive inside institutions that refuse to admit they were taught. He walks his new routes slowly, learning them the way he learned the others, by sound, by echo, by the way doors close when no one is rushing them. He notes where people linger without purpose, where eyes move before feet, where routine feels rehearsed rather than natural. Late morning, he passes a familiar figure across a glassed-in junction. The man does not stop, does not acknowledge him, but their eyes meet briefly and the look is not dismissal. It is recognition without endorsement. That will have to be enough. The guard's access remains limited but not erased. He still sees summaries, still receives alerts, though later than before. He learns to read between timestamps, to infer urgency from what is missing rather than what is sent. By afternoon, confirmation arrives through an indirect channel. The borrowed badge was not taken, it was offered. Not maliciously, not knowingly. Convenience, familiarity, someone assuming trust where verification should have lived. That is how proximity works, not through villains, through shortcuts. The child's schedule is restored fully by the following day. No gaps, no compression. Escorts return to standard strength, though routes remain subtly altered. The larger instruction room is removed from rotation without explanation. The guard watches from elsewhere as routine reasserts itself. He listens for disruption. There is none. In the quiet hours before evening shift change, he stands near a service window overlooking the inner court. The light is lower now, softer against stone. Staff cross in pairs, conversation muted. The palace breathes evenly. He thinks of the moment at the auxiliary door, the fraction of movement, the choice made without permission. He knows the calculation did not favor him. He also knows it did not need to. Protection is not measured by position. It is measured by what never enters the room. His radio remains silent as his shift ends. No further instructions, no corrections. That too is a signal. As he leaves through the staff exit, the palace behind him looks unchanged. It always will. That is its strength and its risk. He adjusts his jacket against the evening air and walks on, already mapping the next set of routes in his mind, already listening for irregularities that do not belong. The story will not be told here. It will not be recorded in reports or acknowledged in briefings. It will exist only in the absence of Arm, and in the quiet certainty that, when the line appeared, someone stood on the right side of it.